The front door didn't quite close anymore. A stubborn gap, letting in a sliver of hallway light and a persistent draft. Ethan knelt before it, screwdriver in hand, trying to coax the hinge into place. The screw turned, but the wood was stripped, tired. It felt like a metaphor for everything else. He could feel the cold seeping in, a constant reminder of the apartment's and his own vulnerabilities. From the living room, he heard Noah's gentle breathing. The boy was asleep on the couch, wrapped in a thick blanket because the bedroom was too cold. The building's heating was unreliable, another battle Ethan fought and lost weekly. He looked at his hands, calloused and smudged with grease from the day's work. They were good hands, but they couldn't fix what was truly broken. The silence was heavy, punctuated only by Noah's soft breaths and the faint hum of the refrigerator. Ethan stood, walked to the couch, and gently pulled the blanket up to Noah's chin. The boy's face was peaceful, untroubled by the eviction notice taped to the door. He felt a familiar tightness in his chest, a quiet panic that had become his constant companion. He returned to the door, not with the screwdriver, but with a folded piece of cardboard, wedging it into the gap, a temporary fix against the cold. The cardboard held for now. The sliver of light was gone, and the apartment was plunged into darkness. It felt a little safer, a little more private. But the draft, he knew, would find another way in. It always did. The cold was patient, and it was persistent. In this fragile quiet, Ethan hoped for a better morning. Morning arrived, with a pale gray glow through grimy windows. Ethan sat at the kitchen table, counting his monthly supply of pills, not to ensure he had enough, but to see how many he could skip. Each pill he didn't take was a few dollars saved for bread, milk, or Noah's bus fare. Noah patted in, rubbing his eyes. "Is it moving day yet?" he asked, hopeful. Ethan forced a smile. "Not yet, buddy. We've still got a little time. Oatmeal or cereal?" As he stirred oatmeal, Noah persisted. "The new place will have a heater that works, right? And my own room?" Ethan focused on the pot, avoiding his son's gaze. "We'll see, Noah. We'll try our best." They ate in silence, a routine that anchored their mornings. For a moment, the weight of the world lifted. But the eviction notice was still taped to the door, the pill bottle still on the counter, and the cold still seeping through the cracks. The quiet arithmetic of their lives would begin again as soon as the bowls were empty. In the quietest hours, Ethan thought of his mother, Eleanor, a woman carved from resilience, her love practical and wordless. Her silence about his father was as profound as her presence. He was a ghost, a name never spoken. Ethan learned not to ask, growing up with an empty space beside him, a question mark shaped like a man. Now, as he faced his own struggles, the absence of his father felt like a tangible void. He had no blueprint for fatherhood, only the one he was trying to create for Noah. Despite his own struggles, Ethan was the unofficial handyman for half the building. His days were a patchwork of odd jobs, fixing faucets, assembling furniture, changing light bulbs. The pay was meager, but it was grocery money, a small victory against the tide of bills. More than money, it gave him purpose. For a few hours, he wasn't a man on the verge of homelessness. He was a problem solver. His neighbors knew he was struggling. They offered tea, leftovers, and quiet understanding. This network of support was a lifeline, making the grim building feel like a community. Sometimes, he resented fixing others' homes while his own fell apart, but helping was also an affirmation. Even when powerless over his own life, he could make a difference in someone else's. In a world determined to break him, that small fact was solid ground. It kept him going, one day at a time. One afternoon, as Ethan packed up his stools, a woman he didn't recognize approached him in the hallway. She was older, with kind eyes and a hesitant smile, holding a small, ornate wooden box. "Excuse me," she began. "I was told you help people here. "My name is Claire. I'm looking for someone who used to live in this building, a nurse named Eleanor Vance." The name hit Ethan like a blow. He stared at her, mind racing. Claire seemed to sense his shock. "You know her?" "She was my mother," Ethan managed. Claire's eyes softened. "Eleanor was a dear friend. We lost touch. I was given this box which holds a letter for her son. I was told it was important." Ethan looked at the box, beautifully made, nothing like the cheap, functional things in his life. A letter for his mother's son. For him, the simple request had become something monumental, threatening to shift the very foundations of his world. The past, long silent, was suddenly knocking at his door. Ethan took the box, feeling its weight. Claire smiled gently, then left him alone in the hallway. He stood there, the box in his hands, the world suddenly unfamiliar. Sometimes, a stranger's request can change everything. The box was lighter than expected, yet heavy with years of silence. "She passed away," Ethan said quietly. "A long time ago. I'm her son." Claire's eyes filled with sympathy. "She was wonderful, so strong." Then gently, "She never spoke much about your father, did she?" The question hung in the air, simple, direct, devastating. Ethan shook his head, a lifetime of wondering coalescing into a single moment. Claire's question suggested the silence was more than just absence. It was a secret. "This might help," Claire said, gesturing to the box. "The letter inside, it's from him." From him, his father. The ghost suddenly had a voice. Ethan looked at the box, then at Claire, struggling to process. A letter from the man who was a void in his life. The world tilted, the ground beneath his feet no longer stable. The silence wasn't just protection, it was a missing piece of his story. Now the past demanded to be heard. Ethan clutched the box, uncertain if he wanted answers or to keep the question safe. The future, for the first time, felt wide open and terrifying. That night, the apartment felt different. The box sat on the kitchen table, a verdict waiting to be read. Ethan went through the motions of dinner and bedtime, but his mind circled the mystery. Noah, sensing his father's distraction, curled up beside him with a book. Later, Noah whispered, "Can I sleep with you, Dad?" Ethan carried him to the cold bedroom and they huddled together. In the darkness, Ethan wondered what the letter might say. Apology, explanation, or just another absence. For the first time in years, he felt like a son again, not just a father. Days passed. The box remained unopened, part of the apartment's landscape. Ethan told himself he was too busy, but the truth was, he was afraid. Then, another piece arrived, a formal envelope from Blackwood & Associates. His heart pounded as he opened it. The letter was brief. A request to meet at the firm's downtown office regarding the estate of a client. No mention of his father's name, no hint about the box. The language was cold, legal, a summons, not an invitation. Ethan read it 3 times, dread shifting to grim anticipation. The stagnant waters of his life had been disturbed. The questions he'd carried for a lifetime were no longer his to ignore. Someone else was now demanding they be answered. The past was no longer content to stay buried. Ethan realized he couldn't run from it any longer. The letter and the box formed a strange, still life. Artifacts from a life he'd never known. The weight of eviction was replaced by the insistent pull of the past. Ethan stood at a crossroads, continue the daily struggle, or face the unknown at the law office. He looked at Noah, drawing at the table, blissfully unaware of the family's shifting history. Ethan felt a fierce urge to protect him, but knew he couldn't ignore the summons. This wasn't just about his own curiosity, it was about what history he'd passed to his son. Maybe understanding his own past was the only way to build a future for Noah. He picked up the letter, resolve mingling with resignation. The journey his mother started was unfinished. Now it was his turn to walk the next part of the path. A new chapter was about to begin. The city was just waking up, a pale December sun barely piercing the haze. Ethan gripped the steering wheel, his son Noah silent beside him, breath fogging the window. The only sound was the hum of the engine and the thump of tires on cold pavement. Ethan had told Noah they had an important meeting, but left the real reason unspoken. How do you explain to a child that everything might change today? The city grew denser, buildings taller, crowds thicker. Ethan checked the address on his phone, anxiety rising with every block. He glanced at Noah, tracing patterns on the glass, so small and innocent. The urge to turn back was strong, but he pressed on. The silence in the car was heavy, filled with questions neither could voice. Every red light stretched time. Every green light pushed them closer to the unknown. Ethan's heart pounded, his mind racing through words he'd rehearsed but now seemed useless. Finally, the skyscraper appeared, Whitmore Industries, its name gleaming above the entrance. He pulled into the underground garage, darkness swallowing the car. The engine cut off and silence became absolute. For a moment, neither moved. Ethan took a shaky breath, turned to Noah, and forced a reassuring smile. "We're here," he said, his voice distant even to himself. The words hung in the air, simple but heavy. Noah looked at him, searching for answers. Ethan squeezed his hand, wishing he could offer more. Together, they stepped out of the car, into the unknown. The day and their lives were about to change. The Whitmore Industries lobby was vast, cold, and intimidating. Black marble floors reflected harsh lights. Everything gleamed with wealth and power. Ethan held Noah's hand tighter as they approached the front desk. The receptionist's gaze was cool, professional. Ethan gave his name, voice barely above a whisper. Security guards watched, silent reminders they didn't belong. They waited on a cold leather couch, stock numbers flickering across a giant screen. Noah's feet dangled, eyes wide with wonder. Ethan stared at the floor, lost in thought. After a tense wait, a man in a tailored suit appeared. Mr. Harrison, assistant to the board. He led them to a private elevator, the ride up silent and swift. Floor numbers climbed, pressure mounting in Ethan's chest. Noah pressed his face to the glass, marveling at the shrinking city. The elevator opened into a hushed hallway lined with dark wood and abstract art. Mr. Harrison stopped at imposing doors. "They are waiting for you," he said, emotionless. Ethan hesitated, then stepped forward, Noah's hand in his. The doors closed behind them, sealing their fate. The boardroom was imposing. Long table, high-backed chairs, power in every detail. At the head sat Richard Whitmore, silver-haired, stern, eyes fixed on Ethan. Ethan stood, Noah at his side, and placed a worn briefcase on the table. He ignored the board's judgmental stares, focusing on Richard. "My name is Ethan Hayes. This is my son, Noah," he began, voice steady. "I believe we have a family connection you're not aware of." A murmur rippled through the room. Richard's expression barely changed. Ethan opened his briefcase, laying out documents, a birth certificate, a faded photograph, a DNA report. "This was my mother, Eleanor," Ethan said softly, pushing the photo forward. "And this DNA report shows a 99.9% probability I am your son." The room fell silent, all eyes on Richard. The truth was no longer just paperwork, it was standing before them. Richard stared at the photograph, recognition flickering across his face. He looked at Ethan, then at Noah. Seeing the resemblance, the past, long buried, was now undeniable. The boardroom's power dynamic had shifted. This was now a family reckoning. Richard didn't reach for the documents at first, jaw tight, eyes locked on Ethan. A lawyer scanned the DNA report, skepticism fading to shock. The documents passed down the table, unease growing with each set of eyes. Ethan spoke quietly. "My mother never spoke of my father. She took that secret with her. After she died, I found letters, photos, a journal, fragments of a life I never knew." The lawyer cleared his throat. "These are compelling, but..." Ethan cut in, calm and certain. "The DNA is proof. I am Richard Whitmore's son." Silence deepened. Richard finally picked up the photograph, staring at it for a long moment. Recognition, memory, regret flickered across his features. He looked at Ethan, tracing the resemblance, the ghost of a woman he'd once known. The truth was no longer abstract. It was real, undeniable, and standing before him. The board members watched, powerless to intervene. Richard's world, built on control, was cracking. The past had come calling, and there was no turning away. Ethan waited, the weight of history pressing down. Noah stood quietly, sensing the gravity of the moment. The room was filled with the ghosts of choices made decades ago. The truth at last was out. Nothing would ever be the same. Ethan searched Richard's face, not for anger, but for recognition, regret, something human. "I don't want your money," Ethan said, voice steady. "I came for answers. My son deserves to know his family." The board shifted uncomfortably, unused to raw emotion in their world of numbers. Richard looked up, eyes glassy, mask shattered. He saw not just Ethan, but Noah, his grandson. The realization hit him. A son he never knew, a grandson he'd never met. Years of lost time stretched out, unbridgeable. The boardroom was silent, witnesses to a private tragedy. This was no longer business. It was a family imploding. Richard's carefully built world was crumbling. The past had claimed him, and the cost was clear. He had lost a son without ever knowing. The betrayal was his own, of a young woman, a child, and the truth, the silence that followed, was heavy with what could have been. Ethan stood tall, but the ache inside was deep. Noah looked between the men, sensing the pain. The truth had been revealed, but healing would take much longer. The reckoning had only just begun. Noah had watched everything in silence, absorbing the emotion in the room. He didn't understand the documents, but he saw the sadness on Richard's face. The weight of unspoken history settled over them all. As they rode the elevator down, exhaustion replaced tension. The city below was alive, indifferent to their private storm. Ethan replayed the boardroom scene in his mind. Richard's shock, his own words, the unanswered questions. There was no embrace, no closure, just the cold truth and its aftermath. Outside, the city bustled. Noah finally broke the silence. He looked up at Ethan, face serious. "Dad, was that man sad because he didn't know about you?" The question cut through Ethan's haze, simple and profound. Ethan stopped, looking down at his son, emotion welling up. The heart of the matter was laid bare by a child's innocence. Ethan squeezed Noah's hand, searching for words. The journey for answers had only just begun. The city moved on, but their story was forever changed. In the parking garage, Ethan knelt to meet Noah's eyes. How could he explain decades of regret and secrets? "Yes, Noah," he said softly. "I think he was very sad." He placed a hand on Noah's shoulder, grounding himself in the present. Sometimes adults keep secrets because they're scared. Those secrets can hurt for a long time. Richard wasn't a villain or a victim, just a man facing the consequences of old choices. As they got in the car, the weight of the morning settled on Ethan. He had found the truth, but it brought no victory, only a hollow ache. He thought of his mother, her reasons forever unknown. Now he had a father, but not a dad, a history, but not shared memories. He glanced at Noah, quiet and thoughtful. He had done this for his son, to give him a complete story, but the answers only led to more questions. The journey was far from over. As they drove away, Ethan realized this was just the beginning. The road ahead was uncertain, but they would face it together. Across the city, Claire Whitmore walked the halls of a children's hospital, a gift in hand. Richard's daughter, she visited the pediatric ward weekly, a quiet rebellion against her father's corporate world. She sat with a young patient, helping her build a Lego castle, thoughts drifting to her own family. Her father had been distant lately, shadows in his eyes. She remembered stories of his early career, ambition, sacrifice, secrets. Claire sensed something deeper was troubling him. Family was everything, and the idea of a missing piece unsettled her. She'd overheard mentions of lawyers, a delicate situation, the name Eleanor Hayes. The name echoed in her mind, a key to a door she never knew existed. As she left the hospital, city lights twinkling, she felt a premonition. Her world was about to shift. The foundations of her life were trembling. She wondered what secrets her father had kept. The answer, she sensed, was coming soon. Claire walked into the night, the name Eleanor Hayes lingering in her thoughts. A door was about to be unlocked. That night, Ethan sat in his dark living room, the day's events replaying in his mind. The house was silent, his phone dark on the table. No call from Whitmore Industries, just a vast, echoing silence. He wondered if Richard was also alone, haunted by the past. The not knowing was its own kind of torture. After midnight, Ethan's phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. His heart raced as he read, "This is Claire Whitmore. I'm Richard's daughter. I think we need to talk. Not about the company, or money, or the past. Just talk. Are you free tomorrow?" Ethan stared at the message, the word sister feeling foreign and impossible. A new door had opened, one he hadn't known to look for. He didn't know what lay ahead. More pain, more questions, or maybe connection. He typed a single word in reply. Yes. The night was still, but hope flickered in the darkness. The story wasn't over. For the first time, Ethan felt the possibility of something new. Tomorrow, a new chapter would begin. The phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, a message from a number Ethan didn't recognize. He ignored it, focusing on chopping carrots for stew. The kitchen was warm, the city outside cold and distant. Noah, his son, colored quietly at the table. The phone buzzed again. Ethan didn't pick it up. He knew who it was. Richard, the man who called himself his father. Until recently, Richard was just a blank space in Ethan's story. "Is it almost ready, Dad?" Noah asked. "Almost, buddy," Ethan replied, glancing at Noah's drawing. A family under a bright sun. Ethan felt a pang. He turned back to the stew, letting the steam cloud his face. The phone fell silent, holding questions Ethan wasn't ready to face. He'd built his life on routine and self-sufficiency. He had his job. He had Noah. It was enough. But the message was a crack in that wall. He took a deep breath, letting the smell of stew fill his lungs. It was just dinner, just another night. For a little while longer, he could pretend nothing had changed. The silence in the apartment was heavy, but familiar. Outside, the world moved on, unaware of the message waiting on the counter. Ethan stirred the pot, clinging to the comfort of the ordinary. He wasn't ready to let the past in, not yet. The cafe was crowded, the air thick with coffee and rain. Ethan sat in a corner waiting for Claire, his father's lawyer. He wasn't sure why he'd agreed to meet. Curiosity maybe, or the need to understand his own story. Claire arrived, professional but kind. "Ethan?" she asked. He nodded, shaking her hand. She spoke quietly. "Your father, Richard, wanted me to reach out. He's not well. He's wanted to connect, but didn't know how." Ethan listened, silent, tracing the rim of his glass. Claire mentioned a trust, a name, Eleanor, his grandmother, inheritance, responsibility. The words felt unreal. It wasn't about money for Ethan. He looked at Claire, seeing only a messenger. "Why now?" he finally asked. Claire's answer was simple. "Because He's running out of time. The word hung between them, heavier than anything else. Ethan felt the weight of years pressing in. The cafe noise faded. Only the truth remained. He realized this meeting was a turning point. The past was no longer content to stay silent. Ethan left the cafe with more questions than answers. Outside, the rain kept falling. The world felt different, uncertain, but changed. Time was running out. The hospital wing was quiet, the air tinged with antiseptic. Claire led Ethan past the portrait of Eleanor Vance, his grandmother. He saw a flicker of himself in her determined eyes. They didn't go to Richard's room yet. Instead, Claire showed him the pediatric playroom. Children laughed and played, fragile but alive. Ethan thought of Noah, grateful for his health. "Your grandmother started this," Claire said. "No child should suffer for lack of care." Richard continued her work. This was their legacy. Ethan watched a girl stack blocks, absorbed in her task. He felt an unexpected connection to this place. It wasn't about the name on the wall, but the purpose within it. The story was more than an absent father and lost son. It was about legacy, loss, and regret. Ethan couldn't fix the past, but something shifted inside him. Not forgiveness, not understanding, just a quiet acknowledgement. The world wasn't as black and white as he'd believed. He stood in the sunlit room feeling the weight of history. The silence between generations was no longer empty. It was filled with possibility. Richard sat in his study, surrounded by papers and shadows. In the center of his desk, a worn leather box of Eleanor's letters. He opened one, her handwriting elegant and familiar. "My dearest Richard," she wrote, "the house feels so quiet without you." He read about her days, her garden, her charity work. Then, the passages about the girl, the artist he'd loved and left. "She has a fire in her, Richard. Don't let your fear extinguish that." He remembered his fear of his father's disapproval, of abandoning the plan. He'd built an empire, but lost something essential. He'd lost her, and in losing her, he'd lost a son. Now, that son was a man with a child of his own. The weight of regret pressed down on Richard. Another letter. "Doing the right thing is rarely easy, but it lets you sleep at night." He hadn't slept soundly in 35 years. The ghosts were here now, in the room with him. On his desk, a proposal for the Eleanor Vance Initiative. It wasn't just about money. It was about creating something new from the past, a way to honor his mother's spirit, a way to reach the son he'd abandoned. It felt desperate, maybe too late, but it was all he had left to offer. Richard knew redemption was uncertain. Still, he had to try. The letters were a bridge to what might still be possible. He closed the box, feeling both hope and sorrow. The past couldn't be changed, but the future was unwritten. Richard resolved to take the first step. It was a start, and sometimes a start was enough. The foundation was established, the papers were signed, the Eleanor Vance Initiative became real, but felt distant. Small changes crept into Ethan's life: financial security, less worry. He could buy groceries without checking his balance. He enrolled Noah in art class, a door opening to new possibilities. The anxiety about the future eased. Ethan was more present with Noah, listening to his stories, building Lego towers. The exhaustion of single parenthood remained, but it was less desperate. He hadn't seen Richard again. They communicated through Claire. It was a safe distance, a buffer against overwhelming emotions. Ethan knew this calm was temporary, a pause before the next storm. For now, he was grateful for the quiet, grateful for small shifts that made their world brighter. He was learning to accept help he'd never asked for. The foundation was a bridge. Ethan wasn't sure if he was ready to cross it, but he was learning to live in this new, uncertain space. The past lingered, but the future felt a little more open. Change was slow, but it had begun. Sometimes, that was enough. Noah sat at the kitchen table, drawing after his new art class. The table was covered in his colorful creations. Ethan made coffee, enjoying the quiet. He glanced at Noah's latest drawing, a family portrait. This time, there were 3 figures: Noah, Dad, and an older man, with a question mark. Ethan's heart dropped. "Who's that?" he asked. Noah looked up. "I don't know. He's the new person, I think. The one who helped us get art class." Kids see everything, Ethan thought. A man with a question mark for a name, painfully accurate. Ethan sat beside Noah, studying the drawing. It held hope, confusion, and curiosity. Ethan saw himself, holding his son's hand, facing the unknown. He didn't know how to explain a grandfather Noah had never met. Or 35 years of silence. He put his arm around Noah. "Yeah," Ethan said softly. "I think you're right. He's the new person." The drawing stayed on the fridge, a reminder of the question still unanswered and the possibilities ahead. The phone rang on a Tuesday evening. This time, Ethan answered. "Hello?" he said, voice tight. A pause. Then, "Ethan, it's Richard, your father." The words were both confirmation and shock. Ethan walked to the window, heart pounding. He'd imagined this moment 100 times, but now his mind was blank. Richard spoke. "I saw the drawing. Claire showed me. The man with the question mark. I suppose that's what I am." Ethan listened, anger and weariness mixing inside him. Richard's voice was hesitant. "I'd like to meet him. My grandson. And you, if you'll let me." The request was simple but monumental, a chance to fill in the blanks. Ethan closed his eyes, silence stretching between them. "I don't know," he said finally, voice barely a whisper. "I need to think about it." The call ended, but the questions remained. Ethan stood in the quiet, feeling the weight of possibility. The past was no longer silent. The future was uncertain, but open. For the first time, Ethan considered what might come next. The question mark was still there, but so was hope. The silence had been broken, and that was a beginning. The week after the call was a blur. Ethan replayed the conversation, feeling the ripples in his life. Richard's request to meet Noah was a stone in still water. Ethan watched Noah, searching for signs of change. Sometimes Noah stared at the drawing on the fridge. The man with the question mark. The question lingered, silent but present. Ethan felt torn, wanting to protect their quiet life, but also drawn to answers. He remembered his own childhood, the empty space where a father should have been. He didn't want that for Noah. Maybe meeting Richard wasn't about forgiveness. Maybe it was about giving Noah a piece of his story. One evening, Ethan sat at the table looking at the drawing. The future was terrifying, unpredictable, but maybe it was time to take a step. The canvas was unfinished. The phone felt heavy in Ethan's hand. Richard's number was saved now, a name holding a lifetime of weight. A week of silence had passed. The not knowing was becoming unbearable. Ethan thought about what a meeting would mean. Introducing Noah to his grandfather, a ghost made real. It was easier to do nothing, to let the silence stretch on, but Noah's drawing was a constant reminder. Ethan couldn't erase the past, but maybe he could change the future. Not a perfect family, but something real. A family with scars, but also the possibility of connection. The risk was huge, but so was the hope. Ethan took a breath, still standing in the middle. The question was no longer if, but how. This wasn't the end of the story, it was just the beginning. The hard part was what came next, building a bridge over years of silence. Ethan looked at the phone, thumb hovering over the name. The story was unfinished, and that was enough for now. The clinking of silverware was the loudest sound at the table. Outside, the city rushed by, but here, time slowed. Michael stared at his water glass, avoiding David's eyes. 7 years had passed, holidays missed, birthdays forgotten, silence growing heavier. Sarah broke the quiet, her hand resting between them. "It's good to see you both," she said, her voice steady. Michael met her gaze, offering a small, hopeful smile. David cleared his throat. "The drive was long," he said, not quite an apology, but an opening. Sarah nodded. "I'm glad you made it safely." The waiter arrived, reciting specials, oblivious to the tension. They ordered quietly, grateful for the distraction. For a moment, they pretended to be any other family. But when the silence returned, it was different, filled with small gestures and tentative hope. It was a silence waiting to be broken. The food arrived, another excuse to avoid conversation. Michael focused on his steak, memories of childhood dinners flickering in his mind. David looked older, distant, a stranger shaped by years apart. Sarah tried to bridge the gap with safe questions about work and family. They answered, but it felt like acting. The real conversation was in the pauses, the glances, the way David's fork scraped his plate. Their eyes met, briefly, accidentally, a flicker of recognition and shared sadness. The anger felt distant now, replaced by loss. Sarah mentioned a family vacation. David smiled. "You fell out of the canoe," he said. Michael laughed. "You pushed me." For a moment, the tension lifted, but the quiet returned, a reminder of how much had been lost. The wall between them remained, but a crack had formed. As plates were cleared, Sarah slid a small box to David. "Happy birthday," she said. David opened it, a leather-bound journal, like the ones he used to carry. "Thank you," he said, emotion thick in his voice. Michael watched, regretful for his own silence. The gift wasn't about the journal, it was about reaching out. David placed the journal on the table, glancing at Michael. The silence was heavy with regret, but not anger. Michael wanted to say, "I'm sorry, I miss you." But the words stuck. Instead, he nodded, a small gesture and acknowledgement. David nodded back. It was a conversation without words, an agreement that this was hard, but they were trying. The silence that followed was shared, not empty. It was the beginning of something new. Outside, the city lights seemed a little brighter. The drive to Sarah's house was quiet, the engine's hum filling the space. They entered the home they'd grown up in, memories clinging to every corner, the height chart on the doorframe, the worn sofa, reminders of a time when they were close. David picked up a childhood photo from the mantel. "He would have hated this," David whispered, meaning the silence, the distance. Michael nodded. "I know." It was the most honest thing they'd said all night. The quiet in the house was different, familiar, comforting. They settled in the living room, surrounded by echoes of their past. For the first time, the silence felt like home. It was a space for honesty, for grief, for hope. They were no longer just avoiding the past, they were facing it together. Sarah entered, holding an old envelope. Their father's handwriting read, "For my children." "I found this cleaning out his desk," she said. "I think tonight is the right time." David took the letter, hands trembling. Their father had been gone 8 years. This was a voice from before the silence. Michael's heart pounded, afraid, but hopeful. David opened the envelope, unfolding the single sheet. The scent of their father's study seemed to fill the room. David's eyes filled with tears as he read, "I think I should read this out loud," he said. Michael and Sarah nodded, sitting close together. They prepared to hear their father's voice one last time. David read, his voice shaky but growing stronger. The letter was simple, memories of small moments, expressions of love. Their father wrote, "Life is not about big moments, but the small collections of happiness you gather. Your greatest strength is in the love you share. Everything else is just details." The room filled with peace, as if their father was there. The anger melted away, replaced by shared grief. The letter ended, "Be good to each other, it's all that really matters." David's voice broke. He folded the letter, placing it on the table. The silence was full of love, memory, and understanding. Michael reached out, hand on David's shoulder. David leaned in, sobbing. Michael hugged him, both crying. Sarah joined them, arms around her brothers. The letter hadn't solved everything, but it reminded them what mattered. Morning sunlight felt warmer, hopeful. They gathered at the kitchen table, conversation easy for the first time. Sarah shared her foundation, helping local kids, inspired by their father's values. David, the finance expert, asked, "What kind of help do you need?" Sarah smiled. "Honestly, everything. I'm good at the community part, but the financial side." Michael offered, "I could redesign the website and flyers." For the first time, they saw a path forward, not to the past, but to something new. They could build this together. It was a way to honor their father, not by dwelling on loss, but by creating hope. They weren't fixing the past, but building a future. The foundation was more than charity. It was a new beginning. They were learning to be a family again. Together, they could make something good. In Sarah's cluttered office, they worked side by side. David organized finances, finding ways to stretch their resources. Michael sketched a new logo, 3 hands supporting a sapling. Sarah moved between them, energized by their teamwork. "I love that one," she said, pointing to Michael's drawing. "That's what it's all about." The house buzzed with quiet collaboration. It wasn't a perfect reunion. Awkwardness lingered, scars remained, but they were building something new, laying a foundation for their family and their community. They were learning to be brothers again, not the boys they were, but the men they'd become. Through simple shared work, they found connection. They were finding their way back to each other. That evening, they sat on the porch, watching the sunset. The air was cool, the sky painted in soft colors. David suggested a scholarship in their father's name, for a music student. Michael smiled. "I like that." Sarah joined them, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. "It's a start," she said. It wasn't a happy ending, but a new beginning. Their family story was still being written, together. There would be challenges, but now there was hope. Michael thought of his father's letter, of the foundation of love. Family isn't a fortress, it's a garden. It needs tending, light, and care. You let people in, slowly, and that changes you. The work of healing is quiet, steady, a gentle transformation. In that quiet, they found they were not alone, and the light always finds a way in. The mornings have found their own rhythm, a quiet, fragile thing. I wake before the sun, the house still and dark. Coffee brews softly in the kitchen as the world outside is a deep shade of blue. This is my time to think, or to try not to think. I watch the steam rise from my mug and disappear. The day ahead is full of ordinary things, but nothing feels ordinary anymore. The house feels like it's holding its breath, and I am holding mine with it. Ethan, 6, is always the first up after me, shuffling in with his dinosaur pajamas and sleepy eyes. He drinks his orange juice in silence, then whispers, "I'm going to build Legos," and disappears. Maya, 14, arrives like a storm. Doors slam, music plays. She butters her toast with precision. I want to ask her a million things, but instead I just say, "Don't forget your lunch." She nods, mouth full, and we exchange our daily script. A small, safe exchange. My sister Sarah is last. She's their mother, and after 20 years apart, she lives here now. She always looks tired, but her smile is real. "Coffee?" I ask. She nods. "Please." We stand together by the counter, watching the sky turn from blue to pink. We don't talk about the past or the future. We just stand there. Two sisters in a quiet kitchen as the world outside begins to wake up. It's a new routine, our new normal. The day unfolds in small check-ins, quiet messages, almost invisible. Around 10, my phone buzzes. It's Sarah. He ate all his snack. She's at community college, building a new life. I'm at my desk, working. Ethan is a picky eater. This small victory feels huge. I text back a thumbs up emoji. No words needed. Later, a selfie from Maya in the school library. She's making silly faces with a new friend. Relief washes over me. She's finding her place. I send a heart emoji. Our silent conversation continues. At 3, an email from Sarah. Art project. A photo of a lopsided blue-green clay pot Ethan made. He was so proud. It's more than a pot. It's proof he's settling in, creating, healing. These messages are lifelines, small threads connecting us. We're a family learning how to be a family, careful with each other, offering small pieces of our day like gifts. We're building a bridge, one text, one photo at a time. Across the distance, we're slowly, carefully, whispering our lives back together. The call came on a gray Tuesday afternoon, rain falling as I drove home from the store. My phone rang, Ethan's school. My heart jumped. I pulled over, answered, the nurse. Ethan has a fever and his ear hurts. You need to come get him. My hands shook as I called Sarah. She whispered, I'm in class. I have a test. I can't leave. I told her I'd get him. My voice sounded calmer than I felt. At school, Ethan sat in the nurse's office, small and pale, holding his ear. The nurse handed me a form. Probably just an ear infection, but he should see a doctor. I knelt in front of Ethan. Let's go home. He nodded, glassy-eyed, and let me help him with his coat. We walked to the car in silence. His hand was hot in mine. I buckled him in. He leaned against the window, eyes closed. The rain kept falling, wipers swishing back and forth. I drove carefully, mind racing. Doctor, fever, Sarah in class. The weight of it all. I felt a surge of anger, not at Sarah, but at how hard everything was for them, and how easy it was for me to fix this one small thing. I called Dr. Evans's office from the car. The receptionist said, bring him right in. A problem, a phone call, a solution. Relief washed over me. Ethan slept on the drive. I thought about all the times Sarah must have faced this alone. No car, no doctor, no easy fix. The gap between our lives felt like a canyon. Dr. Evans was gentle, let Ethan play with her stethoscope, made him laugh. Bad ear infection, she said, and wrote a prescription. You're a good aunt, she told me. I just nodded. I wasn't his mother, just the one with good insurance, the right connections. We went to the pharmacy. The pink medicine cost $5. I thought about how much $5 could mean when you have nothing. I helped Ethan into the car. He was already feeling better. The sun tried to break through the clouds, but I felt a shadow inside me, a discomfort that had nothing to do with the weather. That evening, Sarah sat on Ethan's bed, touching his hair as he slept. Thank you, she said, eyes on her son. I don't know what I would have done. I stood in the doorway, not wanting to intrude. It was nothing, I said, but we both knew it was everything. She looked up, eyes full of gratitude and pain. When we first came here, I was scared you'd try to be their mom, to replace me. The words hung heavy between us. I walked in, sat in the armchair. Sarah, I could never replace you. I don't want to. You're their mother. I'm just here to help, the backup, the person you can call when you have a test and your son has an ear infection. She smiled, sad, but real. A very well-connected backup. I know it's not fair, I said. My life is different, easier. But I can use what I have to help, not to take over, but to lift up. She nodded, looking back at Ethan as he mumbled about dinosaurs in his sleep. Okay, she whispered. It wasn't a solution, but it was understanding, a new piece of common ground. The next day, Ethan was better. The pink medicine worked its magic. He played on the floor, carefree, unaware of the privilege that made him better so quickly. Sarah was quiet, studying for her makeup test, another hurdle. I made her tea. "He seems so much better," she said, relief and something else in her voice. "He is," I said. We both knew the unspoken part. The medicine was easy for me to get. Later I paid bills, insurance, copay, pharmacy, manageable numbers for me. I thought about Sarah, navigating the system without a job, without insurance, a maze, a labyrinth. I closed my laptop, guilt settling in. My help wasn't simple. It came with strings, money, access, privilege. Every time I made a call or paid a bill, I was pulling on those strings, making their lives easier but also highlighting the gap between us. I didn't know how to bridge that gap. I only knew how to use my resources and hope it was enough, for now. A week later, we went to Ethan's school for the winter art showcase. The hallways were crowded, the walls covered in children's art, a riot of color and noise. Ethan, vibrating with excitement, pulled us to a mural, a winter scene of paper snowflakes and trees. In the center, a collection of painted handprints. "That one's mine." Ethan pointed to a bright blue handprint. He looked up, eyes shining. "Do you like it?" Sarah knelt beside him. "I love it. It's the most beautiful handprint I've ever seen." She pulled him close. He beamed. He had made his mark. I stood back, letting them have their moment, and snapped a picture. Not of the art, but of them. This was what mattered. Connection, love, a small moment of belonging. The blue handprint was more than art. It was a symbol of a new beginning, a small, brave mark on the canvas of the future. That night, after Ethan was asleep, Maya came into the kitchen as I cleaned up. She leaned against the doorframe, quiet for a long time. I didn't push her to talk. I just kept cleaning. Finally, she said, "He was really happy tonight." "He was," I said. "He was so proud of that handprint." She picked up a dish towel and started drying dishes beside me. "It's weird," she said, not looking at me. "Seeing him like that. He's been so quiet since Dad left." The words were simple, but heavy. "I'm glad we're here," she said, suddenly meeting my eyes. "It's good for Ethan." It was the most she'd ever said about their situation, a crack in her wall. "I'm glad you're here too," I said. The house had been too quiet before. She finished drying the last plate, stacked it on the shelf. "Thanks for, everything." "Anytime," I said. She smiled, then disappeared back to her room. Something had shifted, a small seed of trust planted in the quiet kitchen. I sit in the dark. The house is quiet, everyone asleep. The art show feels distant, but Maya's words echo. "I'm glad we're here." I think about the blue handprint, a small mark of existence. We are here. We are a family. We are trying. It's not perfect. It's messy and complicated, but it's real. I look out the window at the moon, a silver sliver in the sky. I think about the road ahead, long, unlit, full of unknowns. There will be more challenges, more tests, more moments of doubt and reminders of the gap between our lives. Recovery isn't a straight line, it's a winding path, built in small moments, a text, a shared task, a quiet conversation. We're learning a new language together, the language of family, of patience, forgiveness, and showing up. The silence in the house is different now, full, not empty. I am not alone, and neither are they. We are a strange new constellation, stars that have found each other in the dark. This isn't the end of the story. It's just a pause, a breath before the sun rises, and we do it all again. I wonder what choices tomorrow will bring, what new challenges will find us on this road. The kitchen was cold, the kind of cold that settles deep into the floorboards overnight. Ethan stood by the counter, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee, watching steam rise in lazy curls. Upstairs, a floorboard creaked. Noah, his son, moving around. The sound was new, a small disturbance Ethan was learning to welcome. He took a slow sip of coffee, the warmth, a small comfort. He thought about making breakfast, pancakes maybe. Did Noah still like pancakes? Ethan wasn't sure what Noah liked anymore. He just stood there, listening to the house wake up. The refrigerator hummed, a car passed outside, small reminders of life resuming. Noah came downstairs, nodded at Ethan, and went straight for the cereal. Ethan watched him, noticing the slump of his shoulders, the distance in the room. Years of silence had built a chasm between them. Ethan wanted to speak, to bridge the gap, but the words felt heavy. So he drank his coffee, listening to the clink of Noah's spoon. It was a new rhythm in the house, not the noise of an unbroken family, but something. It was a start. Ethan rinsed his mug, glanced at Noah scrolling through his phone. Regret and hope mingled in his chest. He was here. They both were. For now, that was enough. The cabinet door in the hallway had been sticking for weeks, a small, persistent annoyance. Today, Ethan needed something to do with his hands. He found his old toolbox, knelt on the floor, and examined the hinge. As he worked, he sensed Noah watching from the doorway, arms crossed. Noah didn't offer to help, just watched in silence. Ethan focused on the rhythmic turning of the screwdriver. It was always broken, Noah said quietly. Ethan paused, looking up. Even when Mom was here, Noah added, gaze dropping. The words hung heavy between them. Ethan turned back, applied oil, and opened the door. It swung smoothly now. He stood, wiping his hands, and met Noah's eyes. A small nod passed between them. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was acknowledgement. A shared moment in the quiet hallway. Some things, even small things, could be fixed. And maybe, so could they. Claire had given him the box last week, old letters from his mother. Tonight, with the house still, Ethan opened it. Inside were bundles of letters he'd written years ago. He read about his first apartment, his dreams, meeting Noah's mother. Each letter was a snapshot of a man full of hope. He read about his excitement at becoming a father, his hopes for his son. The words were so full of love. Shame and regret washed over him. He'd let the distance grow. He ran his fingers over the ink, connecting to a past he couldn't change. The certainty of youth had eroded, replaced by quiet ache. He read late into the night, Noah's first steps, first words, funny stories. His mother had saved everything. The letters didn't erase the silence, but they were proof the love was real. A reminder, waiting to be rediscovered. Sometimes the past can offer a way forward. Richard's 17th floor balcony overlooked a tapestry of city lights. Ethan stood beside him, the night air crisp. Richard, a man of few words, was a steady presence. "She worries about you and the boy," Richard said, eyes on the city. Ethan admitted, "I don't know what I'm doing. Most of the time, I'm just pretending." He expected advice, but Richard just nodded. Silence stretched, filled by the hum of the city. "Nobody knows what they're doing," Richard finally said. "We just show up, every day. Sometimes we get it right, a lot of times we get it wrong. The important part is the showing up." He placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "The boy sees you showing up. That's more than you think." Surrounded by city lights, Ethan felt a flicker of hope. Maybe it was that simple. Just show up and keep trying. That's what mattered. The city hummed on, indifferent but alive. Claire's backyard was a wild patch of green, her sanctuary. Ethan sat on the back step, watching Claire tend her garden. Richard watched too, pride in his eyes. "She has her mother's hands," he said. "Her mother could make anything grow." Ethan thought about the barren soil of his own life. Yet here was Claire, tending to him, and Noah, coaxing growth from rocky ground. "It takes time," Richard continued. "A garden doesn't grow overnight. You plant, water, wait. People are the same, especially kids. You can't force them to grow. You just provide the right conditions: sunshine, water, space." Ethan glanced at the house, Noah at the table, present. That was a start. Claire joined Ethan, dirt on her hands, and offered him a ripe strawberry. He hesitated, then took it. It tasted of sunshine and patience. It tasted of hope. For the first time in a long while, Ethan felt like he was in the right soil. Growth was slow, but it was happening. The garden, like their family, was taking root. Small things could flourish. All it took was care and time. The old photo album was heavy in Ethan's lap, its cover cracked and worn. He opened it, knowing what he'd find: a life that felt like someone else's. The first photo, Ethan, younger, holding baby Noah, joy on his face. He remembered that day, the fierce love he'd felt. Where had that man gone? He turned the pages. Noah's first birthday, family trips, laughter. The smiles faded in later photos, distance growing. The album told a story of slow erosion. The weight in his lap was the weight of his mistakes. Footsteps on the stairs. Noah appeared. "What's that?" Noah asked. "Just old pictures," Ethan replied. Noah looked at a photo of himself as a toddler. "I remember that shirt." He didn't say more, just stood there looking at the pictures with his father, two strangers, bound by a shared history, searching for connection. The guest room had always felt temporary, a space for visitors, not family. When Ethan first moved in, he'd slept there, a guest in his own life. Now things were changing. Claire insisted, "He needs his own space, Ethan, a place that feels like his." They moved Ethan into the master bedroom, a symbolic step, putting down roots. The work was simple, but it felt monumental. Every object carried weight beyond its size. Ethan looked around the empty room, feeling like an intruder in someone else's memories. Claire noticed his hesitation. "It's just a room, Ethan. You're the one who makes it a home. You and Noah." She opened the curtains, letting in light. "You can paint it, hang new pictures, make new memories." Later, Noah helped carry in the last box. He looked around. "It's a good room. It has better light." Then he was gone, leaving Ethan alone in the quiet space. A small comment, but to Ethan, it felt like a foundation, a corner of a new life, finally being laid. The room was his now. The future was unwritten, but it was theirs to build. The air was colder, autumn giving way to winter. Ethan and Noah walked through the park, no destination, just walking. Noah had agreed with a shrug. They walked side by side, a comfortable distance between them. The only sound was the crunch of leaves. Ethan glanced at Noah, resisting the urge to fill the silence. He'd learned not every silence needed words. Sometimes, silence was a language of its own. In the past, silence had been a wall. Now, it felt thinner, almost like understanding. They passed an empty playground, a lone swing creaking in the breeze. Ethan remembered pushing Noah on swings, the sound of his laughter. The memory ached, but it was sweet too, a reminder the love had been real. As the sun set, Noah finally spoke. "It's getting cold." "Yeah," Ethan replied. "We should head back." They turned, steps falling into rhythm. Nothing profound was said, but the distance felt smaller. The silence felt warmer. It was enough. The first snow of the season fell gently after dinner. Ethan watched from the window as the world turned white. Behind him, Noah watched an old movie, wrapped in a blanket. Claire had left after making stew, the house filled with warmth. Ethan looked at his son, peaceful, at home. He thought about the journey. Awkward silences, small victories, the hinge, the letters, the walk. Each moment, a stitch in a tapestry being rewoven. It wasn't perfect, but it was taking shape. He sat across from Noah, listening to the quiet hum of the house. He remembered Richard's words, "We just show up." Ethan had been showing up, making coffee, fixing things, listening to silence, learning patience. He was learning to be a father again, not the father he was, but the one he could be now. During a commercial, Noah glanced over. The defensiveness was gone, replaced by something softer. "There's stew left," Noah said, a small offer of care. "I know," Ethan replied, smiling. The movie resumed, and they watched together. Outside, snow blanketed the world in quiet promise. The journey wasn't over, but they were on the right road. In the warm, quiet house, hope felt possible. Tomorrow would come, and they would show up, together.